Chapter 18, we now look at the imperfect and the volitives, and then we'll look at prohibitions with all and with lo. So the first thing we want to look at is the imperfect, and again this will be the call imperfect. This is also known as the Ch.18 form, and again that comes from the 3ms form. Just like katal went back to the 3ms form, so does this one. And so you get a Ch.18, and that's your 3ms form as you see it, and so that's where that form, or that name comes from, Ch.18. Okay, when we're looking at the imperfect is also known as the prefixed conjugation. And so a lot of your pronominal elements are put on the front of the verb, where if you remember with the call perfect, it was really like the pronominal elements were like suffixes. They were put on the end of the word, suffirmatives. And so we want to keep that distinction in mind. Again, the vowel that goes under or really above R2 will be the thematic vowel. And again, in our form Ch.18, it's the holum between R2 and R3. And that is your thematic vowel. And again, that's where a lot of the action is going to be with the call imperfect. Now, in the chart I give you on 18.2, you can see that some have holum as the thematic vowel, but other verbs have patach. And you're going to see some variety in thematic vowels for the imperfect, but you're going to see something for the perfect too. There'll be some variations. Usually you get the patach if the R3 letter is a guttural or if the R2 letter is a guttural. But for now, just see them all as holums unless we tell you otherwise. At least the textbook tells you otherwise. A lot of times I'll give you something like this, and that'll tell you, but that's coming in the future, and so we'll wait to another time for me to explain. But I'll tell you the thematic vowels. You cannot, it's hard to memorize what thematic vowel a particular verb is going to have, again, unless you have a guttural in the second or third position. Okay, the thematic vowel also will reduce if you have a vocalic ending, just as in the call perfect. Remember the call perfect again. If you had a 3CP and you had that vocalic ending, you'd get the reduction here. Well, we're going to get the same thing for the call imperfect in a form like this. This is your 2FS. The thematic vowel is really like a chametz chatuf, and here it's in the open position, and so a thematic vowel in an open position with a vocalic ending, that's going to mean reduction. You'll get a vocal schwa. And so again, if you have a vocalic ending, look for reduction of your thematic vowel. Now again, in the prefixed elements, as I've mentioned before, if you look down at on section 2 of 18.2, you'll see how the independent pronoun is sort of, again, cut down, however you want to see it, and then placed on the front of the imperfect in order to create an imperfect verb. You can see Ch.18, how you get ani, and you put that aleph there, and so you can see that. Now, the other endings of the imperfect, again, they do have syllabic endings, but that's only for the second and third feminine plural. That is the tiktolna form. Tiktolna. You see, this na is a syllable. You have a consonant and a vowel. And so tiktolna, the accent being again with the thematic vowel. And so there is your syllabic endings. For your vocalic endings, as you see, you get them with the 2FS and the 2MP and the 3MP forms. And with those, you always get reduction of the thematic vowel. And you also have no non-endings in some of the other ones, as I have listed there. And so you want to remember that. Usually your performative has a huric for the vowel that goes with your performative, but you have one variation, and that is with the first common singular, the Ch.18 form. In the Ch.18 form, instead of getting a huric, you'll actually get a segol. And the reason for this is probably the influence of the guttural. You know how gutturals are. They always want their way. They have to have it different from everyone else. And so the aleph will often get a sagol where you would expect a hirik. So don't be surprised by that. And so again, that's the basic endings. To remember the performative endings, there is a word known as Ch.18. This is again a made-up Hebrew word that's designed to get you to know the performatives of the imperfect. Aleph is your 1CS. Your yod is what you would see for your third person, like 3MS and some others. The tav is, of course, for the feminine and also for the second masculine singular. And then the noon here, again, will be for the 1CP. And so by saying Ch.18, these are the letters that you'll see at the front, tacked on the front of an imperfect verb to give you the person, number, gender. Okay, now we need to talk about the meaning of the imperfect. And for right now, if you see an imperfect, you just want to translate it as a future tense. But the imperfect in Hebrew is quite flexible. And the deeper you go into Hebrew, you'll see that the imperfect can be translated in many ways. But right now, at this stage, just go with a simple English future and you're going to be fine. Next, in section 4, we have the volitives. The word volitive has the idea of wish or desire. It comes from a Latin root, volo, which again means to wish or desire. And so these volitives are expressing the wish or desire of the speaker. And if the speaker is the first person, that volitive we'll call the cohortative. If it's in the second person, that volitive we will call an imperative. And if the volitive is in the third person, we will describe that as a jussive. And so you need to remember that. Now, in fact, jussives can occur in all persons in Hebrew, first, second, and third persons. They're particularly common in first and second. But for now, let's just think of jussives as third persons. When we get to the prohibitions, then we'll show a jussive as a second person. But again, first person volitive we'll call cohortative, second person imperative, third person jussive. That's what we're going to do for now. Let's talk about the form of the first person volitive, the cohortative. All these forms will be based on the imperfect form. So the first thing you want to do is memorize that imperfect paradigm. And that has to be number 1. So the one that starts with ectol and so forth. You want to totally memorize that. And then when you get to your volitives, with just a few adjustments, they're not too difficult. The cohortative is first person, so it can be a first person singular, that'd be the aleph, or the first person plural, that would be a noon. And then you have the root. And then you add a comments at the end. This is vocalic ending. We'll put a phony hey here. But we have a vocalic ending, and so you know what that means for the thematic vowel. It means reduction. And so this is the form of a cohortative. The form of the cohortative for the first person, if it's singular, you'll have the aleph, which means you'll get the sagol, of course. And you'll have this comments hey, the hey being phony, but it's really a vocalic ending, so you get reduction there. Ektala. To translate a cohortative, you can either make it sort of like a proposition, let me kill, or it can be an emphatic way of expressing the desire of the speaker, I will kill. And so that is the cohortative. Next is the imperative. And the imperative, again, is the second person. And so the best way to do this is to take a second person imperfect first. So look at the second person imperfect. So tiktol would be the 2ms. Imperfect. But now what we want to do is we want to make an imperative out of it. And to make the imperative, all you want to do is just chop off the imperfect performative. And when you do that, you really are on your way to creating an imperative. And this is the imperative for your 2ms. And you'd say katol. And so that is the ending that you need for that. Or not ending, but that's what you need. Chop off that front, and katol is the absolute answer. Now, it gets a little more complicated when you get to the second feminine singular. Watch this. You have tiktali like this. And again, we want to chop off the performative. But that gives us a problem. Namely, now we would have two vocal schwas. This schwa now has to become vocal because it's beginning the word, and that's the reduction of the thematic vowel. That's a vocal schwa. So what are we going to get? We're going to get a schwa fight. That's exactly what we're going to get. And so just make the first one a hirik, kit li, and you're ready to go. So again, if you chop off the front and you end up with two schwas beginning the word, simply have a schwa fight and don't worry about it. And everything will be fine. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and look at tiktolna. This is your imperfect. And again, for this one to make an imperative, second feminine plural, all you do is chop off the performative and you say katolna, and that's it. So again, it's not very difficult to form these. And that's for your imperative. Now there is one more form that you need to know, and that is what we call the emphatic imperative form. And it looks like this. There's no metheg here, and so we want to divide it here and say kot la. This is a kamet schatuf, kot la. It's very different from the perfect. The perfect is katala. You got the metheg. That is a call perfect 3fs. But if you get rid of this metheg, now you're looking at an emphatic imperative. How do you like that? And so again, you need to pronounce this kot la, and if you have the call perfect, you want to say katala. So there's a difference that you have to watch out for. So for your imperatives, you really have 5 forms that you've got to watch out for. I list the 4 there where you just chop off the performative, but right below that I talk about the emphatic imperative form, and that you also need to remember. And of course, whether you're translating the emphatic form or just the regular katol imperative, it's just simply kill. It's just that's a simple, even though it's an emphatic imperative, we're not going to translate it any different than a regular imperative. But that's what the form is usually called in many of the traditional grammars. Next is the jussive form. And the jussive form, again, is a third person. And the good news for you is right now, the jussive form and the imperfect form are absolutely identical. The difference would only be by context about whether are we looking at an imperfect or are we looking at a jussive. If you're looking at an imperfect, of course, you want to make it a simple future. He will kill. If you have a jussive, let him kill. And context will tell you the difference. But sometimes one could argue for either one. You could argue for the jussive or for the imperfect. And so let context guide you in that. Again, you could get either one. Now we want to talk about prohibitions. There's two ways to do a prohibition. You can do a prohibition with lo, and you can do prohibition with al. Okay, so we have 2 negatives. Lo is definitely the stronger prohibition, and this is what you would see, like for instance in the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not. And so you see lo usually with the stronger prohibitions. And all is still a prohibition, but it's kind of like do not do something. Do not kill. You shall not kill, or, you must not kill. So the lo, in general, is more powerful than the all. If you use the lo, then you're going to use an imperfect. And so you're going to use an imperfect second person, not an imperative. So if you want to say you must not kill, or thou shalt not kill, or something like that, you want to use lo plus the imperfect, not the imperative. You do not negate imperatives in Hebrew. And if you use the all, technically you're using the jussive. Okay, so if you use the all, you're really not using an imperfect, you're using a jussive. Now again, right now the form's going to look the same, whether it's the jussive or whether it's the imperfect. It's going to look identical to you. But as you continue on in the grammar, you're going to find examples where the jussive is not like the imperfect, and therefore you'll see all really does take the jussive, and lo takes the imperfect, and you want to keep that in mind. But again, all does not take an imperative, and lo does not take an imperative. And so again, you must keep that in mind. Well, that's it for Chapter 18. Now you need to read the textbook, prepare the questions and the vocabulary and the drills.